The Jeff Younger Show is on. Dedicated to my sons, James and Jude.
Look, you're being lied to by almost every serious text you read, and you don't even know it. It's not because you're stupid. It's because you were never taught how smart people actually communicate when the stakes are high. You live in an age in which communication is literal, and you've become excessively literalist. But for thousands of years, the greatest minds wrote one way. They had a surface message for the masses and a real message hidden underneath. They called it esoteric writing. Then, about 100 years ago, everybody forgot how to read those texts. And that forgetting is going to cost you. So why would anybody write with a surface message and a esoteric message? Why would they have two messages in a book? I can tell you that sometimes these messages are even contradictory. Why would they do that? One word: survival. Socrates was executed. Anaxagoras was exiled. Protagoras had all of his books burned and his life and his family's life threatened. Aristotle fled Athens, saying he wouldn't let the city sin twice against philosophy. They were going to execute him. Okay, these are not edge cases. This is the norm, okay? Philosophy, asking the hard questions about power, what people really believe, whether the gods or the God exists, that's always been dangerous, man. Talking about political figures that have the power of life and death, dangerous. Dangerous. Criticizing billionaires that control the military-industrial complex, dangerous. Okay? So the natural condition of human thought is always weakness and insecurity. And remember, smart people are never in charge. Let me say that again. Smart people are never in charge. Smart people are always serving their inferiors. Okay? There's a reason for that. The knowledge lover, the person who wants to be an expert, the person who is an expert, lacks the temperamental qualities to rule. So you're always going to be ruled by your inferiors to some degree if you're an expert, right? So thinking people that want to tell the truth and impart knowledge are always in danger in every age. So what happened? Smart people, thousands of years ago, learned how to write in code. They could stay safe on the surface, knowing that the average people would never even know what was really being said. Well, this is the part where I'm supposed to beg you to subscribe. I'm supposed to say something like, smash the button or join the community. I'm not going to do that. I'm a 60-year-old man who's been in more fights with the system than you've had birthdays, son. The information I'm putting out is either going to reach the men who need it, it's going to disappear. YouTube shows my videos to people who subscribe. That's just how it is. That's the real world. It hides them from people who don't subscribe. That's just how it works. So if you want more of this, hit subscribe, hit the bell, or don't. I'm not your mother. Okay? The truth was beneath it. You could say this: the real message in a book by a truly great thinker is in the white spaces between the sentences. And that protected them while still allowing them to communicate with those who could understand. Why did we forget this? Well, one reason I think, this is all just kind of conjecture. I wouldn't classify this as something that I could say is true. I would say it's likely true. Liberal democracies created unprecedented freedom of expression for people. And for the first time in history, you could kind of say what you thought without losing your head. And people kind of forgot that persecution is the natural state, because for a long period of time, we didn't really experience it in super extreme ways. That same success of kind of carving out a space of freedom of expression seemed to have convinced a lot of people that esotericism never even existed. So when scholars read old texts and they find contradictions, they go, what is wrong? This guy's super smart. How did he make such a stupid mistake? And they started, blaming it on translation errors or just oversights by the author. None of that's true. Okay? None of that's true. But this became the default way we think about these texts. And it's why probably when you read old texts and you see some of these kinds of problems, you think, well, what is the big deal? You read Socrates, he argues one thing in one dialogue and another thing in another dialogue, right? So I'm going to teach you why you should always assume that these great authors knew exactly what they were doing and that those contradictions were written down intentionally. And the best way to see that is to look at some of the techniques about how did people hide things in writing. The first one is the one we've been talking about, intentional contradictions. It says one thing in chapter 3 and the opposite in chapter 7. That's code for the people that know to say, hey, look in between that section because that's where I put my hidden message. Normal readers would dismiss this as an error, but careful readers ask, well, which one is true? Is he pointing beyond both? What's in between those two contradictions? Another technique is dispersal. The dangerous idea is sort of broken into pieces and it's scattered throughout the text. But if you put them all together, you can get it. They seem harmless when they're alone. They're only assembled by people who would know what to look for. Another one is dissembling the target. All right. You criticize the ancient Athenians or let's say the French, the Bourbon dynasty. But what you're really talking about is the present day. Right? I talk about the ancient world, but I'm really criticizing the present day. You see what I mean? Another way you can do that geographically, I'm criticizing the Russians, but I'm really criticizing America. Okay. You can say, well, I'm criticizing those Yankees in New York, but I'm really criticizing the Texas government. This is dissembling the target. Another technique is just strategically placing the message, right? You put safe statements at the beginning where people pay attention. The dangerous truths are hidden in the middle where most people are going to skip. Only the careful readers will make it through the boring middle. So intentionally boring readers was a technique of hiding messages. Another one is just omission. I forget something obvious, okay? The silence is the message. You can also forget something in the sense of making an error. This is a famous passage from Machiavelli in which he has David bring his own sword to the fight with Goliath, and he beheads Goliath with his own sword, which we know from the Bible, he used Goliath's sword, and he did not take a sword, intentionally did not take a sword into battle. Machiavelli did not make that mistake on accident. He's trying to say something there. And for the careful reader, you would notice that and you would get his message. Actually, if you go and read it, you'll see now that I've told you that, the true message is actually screaming at you, telling you the truth about what Machiavelli really meant. What does this have to do with you, though? I mean, you're not Machiavelli. Well, there's two things. First of all, you're reading text wrong, okay? And if you can't read Plato, Aristotle, the church fathers, you're going to miss most of what's important in what they say. You're just reading the propaganda later, right? You're reading the people that, in many cases, they were intentionally trying to mislead, and you're falling into the misleading steps that they set up for you. They set up a trap for you, and you're falling into it, right? And you think that's all there is, and you think you're super smart. I would say 99.99% of people that I know who read Plato totally misunderstand Socrates and Plato. Totally. I mean, not in the sense that they miss some main points. They don't get that. I'm saying they have the opposite intended meaning of the writings. Okay. There's only very few people. In fact, there's only 3 people, and one of them I met on X. He's become an acquaintance of mine. He actually covers the great books very well. Very few people can understand Plato because it's mostly written esoterically. And this matters because, I mean, these are the texts that, contain the accumulated wisdom about power and human nature that took thousands of years to develop. The old quote, all of Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato. It's not, I don't think that's actually true, but almost true. It's almost true. That wisdom is important to preserve, but it's hidden from you. It is not being made available to you. So that's the first thing. You're actually being deceived by these books. You're not learning from it. The second thing, and I think this is really important. You need to learn the techniques yourself. Why? Because very soon we're moving back into those conditions of oppression where you can't say what you think. Actually, if you think about it, it's pretty much already here. The surveillance state is actually already built. Cancel culture has already trained you not to say certain things online. You're already doing it, okay? The digital record is permanent, right? So you just don't talk about certain things. I'm on YouTube. I have to follow their terms of service. And I do scrupulously follow their terms of service. But if you want to preserve and transmit truths that you can't talk about in an age of oppression, you need to think about what every other persecuted minority in history learned. How to speak so your enemies hear one thing, but your allies hear another. You need to learn how to speak so your enemies hear one thing, and AI hears one thing, but your allies hear another. Now, some of you may be saying, some of you Christians out there will be saying, this is dishonesty. We're supposed to speak frankly, right? Well, I would say this. You're supposed to be innocent as a dove. That's true. You're also supposed to be wise as a serpent. Okay? When somebody says, that's dishonest, we should just speak. That's the liberal talking. Liberalism assumes good faith from power. It assumes that if you speak truth clearly enough, power's going to respect you. Bullshit. Power does not work that way. This is a realist show. We deal with the world as it really is. Power crushes what it can crush. You give power a clear target and it will destroy you. And then your truth is just going to die with you. Here's what the ancients understood. Some truths are dangerous, not because they're false, but because most people aren't ready to hear the truth. So you write in layers. The outer layer gives the masses what they can handle. The inner layer gives those who can think clearly the actual truth. That's not deception. That's precise targeting, and it's being true to both parties, giving the masses what they can tolerate and giving those who know what they need. Now, how do you start reading this way? Well, I would say approach it in 3 steps. Everything I do is try to be real simple. First of all, slow the fuck down when you read. I can tell you right now, you're reading way too fucking fast. Okay. I love Nietzsche's analogy that, these kinds of books are written for people that like to walk down the hallway and check out the rooms and then scratch their head and go back to another room and see if it looks the same in a different light during the time of the day. And, you spend a lot of time reading these books and going back and forth, and you don't necessarily just read them through. You're going back and forth and comparing things, right? Slow the fuck down when you read, okay? When you read Plato's Republic or Machiavelli's Prince, spend a month or 2 with it. Read it 3 times before you even think about what's hidden, all right? Second thing, after you've slowed the fuck down, is map the contradictions. Every time you see something that doesn't fit, I call them contradictions, but it's anything that doesn't fit. Mark it. When the author contradicts himself, note both places. When something seems obviously wrong, like Machiavelli's David with the sword, highlight that. These are your entry points. And once you do that, you're going to start seeing more. I'm not going to, spoil the movie here, but once you do this a couple of times, you're going to see more in those works. And you're going to see that those works are even deeper than you ever thought. I can tell you this, when you read Plato's Republic, there's 4 straight layers. There's a 5th even lower. So, mapping out the contradictions and errors initially is a great way to start. Another thing is to ask, what could this dude not say? What is it that he could not say? All right. Put yourself in his position. What truths would have gotten him killed if he had spoken directly? And once you know what was forbidden, look for where he circles around it, points at it obliquely, communicates through omission, talks about somebody else or some other place, right? Let me give you an example. The very first essay in Montaigne's collection of essays tells a story about a very unfortunate young man who unfortunately had unpopular political opinions about the French Bourbon kings, French Bourbon aristocracy. His father, fortunately, had an estate that was in the rural parts of France, and so he basically kept his son out of the limelight and kept him on the farm, right? And but he did write some diaries, and he wrote letters to friends. And Montaigne says, "Yeah, but the people that knew this person knew what he was really writing." And you read that story, and then you go on to his essays. Most people go, "Wow, he's just telling this interesting story about oppression under the Bourbon kings." Wow, it's interesting. No, Montaigne's talking about himself. He means himself. He's telling you that all the essays I'm going to write have an esoteric meaning. You see how people are so stupid nowadays? They don't even get that. How the hell can you miss that? Right? But modern people do. Absolutely, modern people do. All right, so what's the bottom line, then? For about 150 years, I would say it's a little bit longer than that, but about 150 years, the West has enjoyed kind of an anomalous intellectual freedom. That period is over. It's not ending, it's actually over. The mechanisms of control have been completely rebuilt with better technology, and the mechanisms of oppression are far more sophisticated and pervasive than any in history. And now there's nowhere to run. You can't go into the Western frontier and disappear, get your farm and be yourself. Can't do that anymore. Our ancestors faced similar persecution, and they found ways to communicate anyway. They wrote books that survived censorship, carried dangerous truths across generations, kept philosophy alive through centuries when speaking openly meant death. Most of us are going to fold the moment the costs get real. And most of the people, I've had lots of fights with the censorship apparatus. All my friends abandoned me. All right. But there are some that stuck with me. Some new friends arose as well. Look, you aren't supposed to find this channel. The algorithm didn't recommend me. You found this because someone shared it or because you went looking for something the mainstream just won't give you. That's how real information moves now. Hand to hand, man to man, just like combat. I can't make it show you. I can't get YouTube to do what I want. But I can ask you to do one thing: subscribe and hit the bell. Not for me, for the next man looking for what you found. The gatekeepers control discovery. We control distribution. If this helped you, make sure you see the next one. Send it to someone who needs it. Cut through the bullshit. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. That's the play. And there are just some people that are just going to continue, and they need what the greatest minds in history knew. They need to know how to hide truth in plain sight. Reading between the lines is not an academic exercise. That's another thing that you need to get out of your head. Reading these great books is not some academic exercise. Okay. Most of the people that read these books in the past were not academics. Most of the people that got the true meanings of these books were not academics. In fact, I think being an academic almost makes it impossible for you to truly read these books. Okay? It's a survival skill for anyone who wants to think clearly when the system demands conformity. This is a lesson you can learn from truly reading the old books, the old great books, the old and true way of reading and writing. And it will make you a much more sophisticated person. You'll think differently even when you speak. You'll think differently even when you act. This is a very important video that I made. I really wanted to pass this knowledge on to my sons. I suggest that the age that you're entering, the trees that you're going to be sitting under that, I won't be sitting under in the future, that are growing just now, you're younger than me. You're going to sit under trees that I haven't even seen. You need this skill. You need to be able to communicate with like-minded people. So learn it now. Learn how to read text with esoteric meanings. Practice it on the texts that really matter. So you're doubling up your efforts. You're learning to read esoterically, plus you're reading the great wisdom of the past. Because soon, my friends, you are going to need it for real in ways that my generation could never even contemplate. Get off YouTube and do the work.
The Jeff Younger Show, signing off.